Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brianna Zunino. A lot of people are concerned that an autopsy is scheduled today to identify a woman's body that was found in Reno, Nevada on Friday. There is a possibility that it could be the missing college student, Brianna Denison. The body was found in a field on the edge of the campus of the University of Nevada, which is less than 10 miles from the house where Denison was last seen in the winter of 2008. Brianna Zunino Denison, a vibrant 19-year-old college student with a bright future, vanished without a trace, sending shockwaves through the community and igniting a relentless search for answers. As news of Brianna's disappearance spread, an army of volunteers, law enforcement agencies, and concerned citizens came together, determined to bring her home safely. Brianna's family and friends, gripped by fear and uncertainty, clung to hope while sharing stories of her infectious laughter, unwavering spirit, and love for life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as the search intensified. The quest for answers led investigators down a dark and twisted path, uncovering a heinous series of crimes. Law enforcement tirelessly pursued leads, meticulously piecing together the puzzle surrounding Brianna's disappearance. Their dedication and determination remained unwavering in their pursuit of justice. This is the story of Brianna Zunino Denison, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire. Brianna Zunino Denison was born on March 29, 1988, to Jeff Denison and Bridget Denison. Her mother lovingly called her Breezy because she reminded her of a refreshing breeze on a cool summer day. When Brianna was 6 years old, her father passed away, which was a difficult time for the family, as the loss of a loved one always is. However, she persevered through the pain with the support of her loved ones. She spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and her mother's native town of Mendocino, California. Brianna's passion for traveling and world cultures took her to Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. She studied abroad in Rome, Italy, for a year with her family. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life became part of her radiant personality. Brianna was raised in a tradition that valued children as the most precious possessions. Her relatives and close friends instilled in her the importance of being a loving, spiritual, respectful, and trusting human being. She had a deep affection for children and animals, particularly her dog, Ozzy. Brianna graduated from Reno High School in 2006 and was a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College, where she was majoring in child psychology. On January 20, 2008, Brianna returned home to Reno from sunny Santa Barbara during the winter break to visit some friends and family. She and her friends had attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a travel agency that catered to students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno, which Brianna had reportedly attended in the past. On that specific day, she was last observed alive at approximately 4 a.m. Pacific time at her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus on McKay Court in Reno. She had gone there to sleep after attending a party at the Sands Regency on North Arlington Avenue. When her friend woke up the next morning around 9 a.m., Brianna was nowhere to be found. A small blood stain was noticed on the pillow where Brianna had slept that night, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were all left at the house, which prompted her friend to alert Brianna's parents and local authorities. When investigators arrived, they assessed the crime scene. In the following days, detectives conducted a forensic investigation of the McKay Court residence where Brianna was staying when she was abducted. They found DNA on a doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The investigators were able to confirm that the blood on the pillow belonged to Brianna and began focusing on a kidnapping scenario. The detectives began searching the University of Nevada Reno area for Brianna, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the search efforts. The DNA found on the doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was linked to at least two sexually motivated attacks in the same area in the previous months, one on November 13th and the second on December 16th, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a woman from Reno claimed that she knew another victim who had revealed that she was raped at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada, Reno campus in October 2007. However, the victim had not reported the crime. The investigators released a description of the potential suspected perpetrator based on this information, which was considered a positive lead. Identifiers used by women who had been sexually assaulted by the suspect were used to track down the perpetrator. The detectives began interviewing nearly 100 registered sex offenders who live within a mile of the McKay Court home, but none seemed to be responsible for Brianna's disappearance. Around 1,700 people, including Nevada's then First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, wife of then Governor Jim Gibbons, volunteered to participate in a physical search of a 100-square-mile area to find Brianna, who went missing, but to no avail. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez in Reno was just returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant. As he was walking by the road, he noticed bright orange-colored fabrics standing out among a pile of discarded tree limbs lying in a ditch near a Reno business park. When he approached closer, he discovered neon orange socks which were attached to feet, which at first he thought was a mannequin, but later turned out to be a woman. Jimenez had heard about Brianna Denison's kidnapping, but didn't think the victim resembled the photographs he had seen on billboards. Jimenez did not have a mobile phone, so he promptly returned to his workplace, EE Technologies, to call the Reno police. When the police arrived at the South Reno lot, Jimenez was informed that the victim was Brianna Denison, as an autopsy report had confirmed that the body found in a field near a Reno business park was hers. Brianna had been assaulted and killed. A piece of underwear was also found near Brianna's body, along with DNA evidence from the perpetrator and an unknown female. The police believed that the underwear did not belong to Brianna and might have been left there to taunt the investigators. The police then asked anyone who recognized the underwear as theirs to come forward, as they might have information about the perpetrator's identity, but no one came forward. On January 29, 2008, the Reno police released a description of the unknown perpetrator. The person in question was also linked to at least 2 sexual assaults in November and December 2007, and a woman claimed to have been raped in a parking lot in October. Previous victims had provided enough detailed information for the police to sketch a suspect. An item of underwear was found near Denison's body, along with the killer's DNA and the DNA of an unidentified woman. The police stated that the item of clothing did not belong to Denison and may have been left near her body to taunt the investigators. The police are asking anyone who recognizes the item of clothing as theirs to come forward, as they may know the identity of the perpetrator. On Tuesday, November 25, 2008, 27-year-old James Michael Bella from Sparks, Nevada, was arrested and taken into custody at the Washoe County Jail. He was charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Bella was apprehended while he was dropping off his son at the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. Bella had already provided the police with a DNA sample collected from a doorknob in Brianna's friend's house. The detectives also discovered that Bella was a former Marine and had been previously arrested in 2001 for threatening his former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. On Wednesday, November 26, 2008, during a press conference held by the Reno Police Department, it was confirmed that the DNA collected from Bella matched the DNA found at the crime scene, positively linking him to the murder of Brianna Denison and a previous sexual assault. It was also revealed that a friend of his girlfriend had turned in Bella via the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after Bella's girlfriend had confided to this friend that she had found underwear unknown to her in Bella's truck as they were coming back from Washington State. where Bella had taken a job in March 2008. News media reports of Brianna's case, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle used in another rape, the month before Brianna's abduction, began circulating. Bella was questioned by detectives about his atrocity after the secret witness tip came in, but he denied his involvement and declined to provide a DNA sample. Bella's girlfriend was also questioned and gave police permission to obtain DNA from her 4-year-old son, whom Bella had fathered. The test confirmed that his direct relative, Bella in this case, had left a DNA sample collected at the home where Brianna Denison was abducted and at the other rape that had taken place the prior month. On his way to Washington, it was also revealed that Bella had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the previous sexual assault. At the press conference, officials mentioned that the vehicle was being returned to Reno to be searched and used as evidence in the case against him. On Thursday, May 27, 2010, Bella was found guilty of the murder of Brianna Denison, and after deliberating for about 9 hours, the jury returned a guilty verdict for all counts against Bella, which included kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The defense attorneys argued against the death penalty, stating that Bella suffered an abusive childhood due to an alcoholic father, that he had been a productive member of society before his crimes, and that he was a model prisoner. However, the jurors did not accept these mitigating factors and handed out the death sentence. On July 30, 2010, Bella was sentenced to 4 additional life sentences for multiple counts of rape and kidnapping associated with attacks on 2 victims before Brianna's abduction and murder. Over the years, Bella's appeals have been denied. The story of Brianna Zunino Denison is one of resilience, heartbreak, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Brianna's family, who faced unimaginable pain and uncertainty, stood strong in their fight for justice. Their unwavering determination became a beacon of hope for others facing similar tragedies. The legacy of Brianna's story reaches far beyond her case. It has sparked crucial conversations, inspired community initiatives, and brought awareness to the issues of violence and safety. Law enforcement's tireless efforts ultimately led to the apprehension and conviction of the individual responsible for Brianna's abduction and murder. Their dedication and unwavering commitment to finding justice showcase the power of teamwork and determination. As we remember Brianna, we hold on to the memories of her vibrant spirit, her love for life, and the impact she had on those who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and standing up against violence. In the end, Brianna Zunino Denison's legacy will live on not only through the love of her family and friends, but through the collective efforts to create a safer world for others. May her memory continue to inspire change and hope. Rest in peace, Brianna Zunino Denison.
The case of Sheila LaBarre, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others. But sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBarre. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBarre was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBarre? Sheila LaBarre was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice, adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LaBarre, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strasut filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill Labar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon Labar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill Labar died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure, and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch, La Barre, constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, La Barre met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael DeLodge. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and La Barre remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy La Barre was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy, and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Labar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings. But that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Delage, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made, a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since Labar's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Annis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Labar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. This case is of India's first famous perfume expert, Monica Gourde. The reason for Monica's murder and the method used by the killer shook the entire India. The date was actually October 6, 2016. Monica Gourde resided in the village named Sangolda in the famous state of Goa in India. Goa is known for its famous beaches, culture, climate, and historical places. Besides, here you can also get a chance to witness colorful architecture, greenery, and beautiful sunsets daily. Actually, Monica lived in a 3-bedroom rented apartment in a society named Sapna Raj Valley in Sangolda village. As usual, at around 9 to 10 in the morning, Monica's maid arrives at her house and rings the doorbell of Monica's apartment. However, there is no response from inside. Then the maid rings the bell again, but still no response. Then she tries calling out several times and rings the bell 3 or 4 more times. Additionally, she knocks on the door, but still there is no sound from inside and no one opens the door. This situation feels very strange to the maid because Monica has never done this before. Feeling a little anxious now, she calls Monica's brother, Anand Gourde, who lives in Mumbai, and explains the entire situation to him. After this, Monica's brother Anand calls Monica's phone, but there is no response from the other end. He keeps trying to connect with his sister through calls, but Monica doesn't pick up the phone. After that, Anand calls Monica's neighbor, who lived in the adjacent apartment, and Monica had also left a duplicate key to her. Shortly after Anand's call, the woman arrives outside Monica's house with the duplicate key. She then opens the door with the same duplicate key, and as soon as Monica's neighbor and her maid enter the house, both scream because Monica was lying straight on the bed. Her hands were tied behind the bed, and there was no clothing on the lower part of her body. Additionally, Monica was not moving at all. Seeing all this, Monica's neighbor immediately calls the police. Soon after, the Goa police arrive at Monica's apartment with some lady police officers, an ambulance, and doctors. However, when some doctors cover Monica's body and check her pulse, it is found that Monica has passed away. Afterwards, the dead body is sent for postmortem, and then the room is searched. The police searched the room, but the surprising thing was that there was no evidence of forced entry anywhere in the entire apartment. There were eggshells in the room, suggesting they had been eaten recently. Then Monica's purse was checked, but apart from some debit card bills, the police found no evidence in it. Now, to find evidence, the police consider examining all the CCTV footage in the society. But then they find out that there are no CCTV cameras installed in that society. Besides this, the police also question the people living in Sapna Raj Valley. However, nobody has seen any suspicious person entering or leaving Monica's house in the past day. Nevertheless, the police also investigate from the angle of theft. But nothing was missing from Monica's flat that could indicate that this murder was committed for theft. Looking at all these things, the police believe that whoever murdered Monica had some information about her because no one forcefully entered the flat and nothing was stolen from the house. However, Monica was married, but due to some disputes, she had been living alone for a year. Therefore, the police's suspicion first falls on Monica's husband, Bharath Ramanrutham. After that, the police interrogate him about this murder, but nothing comes to light during the interrogation that would make them suspect him. In fact, Monica was the daughter of a former judge in Mumbai, Ramesh Kuder, and she was initially a photographer, but later she started researching on perfumes. After this, in a short span of time, she became a successful perfume expert. Due to her profession, Monica was quite famous not only in her society, but also throughout the city, often seen hobnobbing with big businessmen. Therefore, as soon as news of Monica's murder surfaced, the entire state of Goa was in shock. At that time, this was the news running on every news channel in the country, and the public wanted to know who the mystery killer was. Meanwhile, Monica's post-mortem report also arrives, revealing that Monica died due to suffocation, and it also becomes clear that she was raped. Anyway, the police had investigated the case from every angle so far, but they had neither found any suspects nor any clues. But then, during the investigation that evening, a police officer suddenly remembers that they had found some debit card bills from Monica's purse, but they hadn't found any debit card during the entire search. Afterwards, the Goa police approached the bank regarding the bills of that debit card and request to check the transaction details of that card. It is found out that on the morning of October 6th at 6 o'clock, this card was used at an ATM in Porvorim area. Porvorim is merely 4 to 5 kilometers away from Sapnaraj Valley. Following this, the police instruct the bank to keep an eye on this card and also scrutinize the CCTV footage of the ATM in Porvorim. The face of the boy who withdrew money from that card was captured on the ATM camera. Subsequently, with the CCTV footage in hand, the Goa police reach Sapnaraj Valley. As soon as the local see this footage, they recognize the boy shown in the footage immediately and identify him as Raj Kumar, who used to be the old security guard here. However, he was fired from his job 2 months ago on charges of theft. For the Goa police, this was a major success because for the first time in this case, the police had a name and a face of suspect. Now, when the police check Rajkumar's background, they find out that Rajkumar, 21, is from Bathinda city in Punjab state, and there have been several theft cases registered against him before. The police had all the information about Rajkumar, but the challenge now was how to catch him. So, to catch Rajkumar, the Goa police started waiting for the next transaction from Monica's debit card. Some time passes and suddenly the police find out that recently some money has been withdrawn from an ATM in Bangalore city using this card. Let us tell you that Bangalore city is about 370 miles away from Sangolda village. Upon seeing this, the Goa police immediately spring into action and contact the Bangalore city police. After that, Bangalore police checked the CCTV footage of that ATM, and Rajkumar's face was clearly visible in the footage of that ATM as well. Following this, Bangalore police took Rajkumar's photo and began questioning all hotels and lodges around that ATM. After a while, a man at the reception of one hotel recognizes Rajkumar's photo and says, "Yes, a man with this face is staying in our hotel, but he has gone out for some work right now." Afterwards, some police officers dressed in civilian clothes stand outside the same hotel, waiting for Rajkumar to arrive. But as soon as Rajkumar returns to the hotel after a while, the police officers recognize him and apprehend him. Now, because the police officers were in civilian clothes, Rajkumar doesn't even recognize them. And just like that, on October 8th, 2016, 2 days after Monica's murder, Rajkumar is arrested from a hotel in Bangalore. Then Goa police are contacted. Afterwards, the Goa police arrive in Bangalore and take Rajkumar to Goa with transit remand from the court. Now, the interrogation begins, and due to the firm questioning by the police, Rajkumar admits to killing Monica. When the police ask him why he did it, he narrates his entire story to the police, and the story goes something like this. Actually, in the month of June, 39-year-old Monica decides to shift to Goa for her perfume business, for which Monica starts looking for a rented flat, and on June 7th, 2016, she reaches Sapnaraj Valley to see a flat. At the society's gate, Monica meets security guard Rajkumar, and the society's management had already called Rajkumar beforehand, informing him that a woman would come to see a flat, so show her the flat. Afterwards, Rajkumar shows Monica the flat, and after seeing it, Monica leaves from there. But what happens here is that during showing the flat, Rajkumar falls in love with Monica unilaterally. Now, day and night, he kept thinking only about Monica. About 4 to 5 days pass like this, and then one day Rajkumar becomes very happy because that day Monica had come to shift to Sapna Raj Valley with her belongings. After that, Monica tells Rajkumar that the flat he showed her, he has taken that flat. Now, because Rajkumar was very happy, he himself, with the help of 2 people, delivers Monica's belongings to her apartment. Rajkumar does this because he wanted to see Monica repeatedly, but because he was a security guard, he didn't get many chances to see and meet Monica. But then one day an idea comes to his mind, and he goes to his manager and says that he wants to do the cleaning and maintenance work of the society's cars along with his duty, because he is in desperate need of money. After hearing Rajkumar's need, the manager also agrees to his proposal because he thinks that this way Rajkumar will earn some extra money, and the needs of the people living in the society will also be fulfilled. However, Rajkumar had something else in his mind, and after this, he goes straight to Monica's apartment. After that, he tells Monica that now he can also clean her car, but it will cost her some extra money. Monica also agrees to this because she didn't have enough time to do household chores while handling her business. Now Rajkumar started cleaning Monica's car and would use the pretext of exchanging keys to also visit Monica's apartment, where he would see Monica 3 or 4 times a day. But it was due to the cleaning of this very car that one day Rajkumar loses his job. It so happened that one day Monica's umbrella went missing from this car. Monica asks Rajkumar about it, but he says he didn't see any umbrella in the car. After this, Monica complains to the society management and says that today, not only my umbrella, but many other persons' things have gone missing just like before. If such incidents continue to happen in the society, it will tarnish its reputation. Now, after hearing Monica's complaint, the society management takes this matter seriously and begins an investigation. It is then found out that only Rajkumar used to open Monica's car for cleaning, besides Monica herself. After that, a search is conducted in the guard room where Rajkumar used to stay, and Monica's umbrella is also recovered from there. Now, since thefts were already a concern in society, after Monica's umbrella is found, suspicion falls entirely on Rajkumar. As a result, on July 22, 2016, Rajkumar is dismissed from his job on theft charges. From here, the story takes a new turn. While Rajkumar had deeply loved Monica before, now he starts to harbor a significant amount of hatred towards her. However, after being dismissed from his job, Rajkumar leaves and starts working as a laborer in the Ponda area of Goa. But even there, he only works for a few days. During this time, he meets Monica twice and asks her to withdraw the theft complaint, but Monica flatly refuses. Now, hearing this, Rajkumar gets even angrier, but he couldn't do anything at that moment. After that, Rajkumar arrives in Chennai in search of a job, then goes to Mumbai from there, and finally spends some time working in Pune city. Everywhere, Rajkumar earns his living by doing odd jobs, but when he doesn't find any decent job anywhere, he returns to Goa on the 2nd of October 2016. But this time, he had something planned in Goa. There was still a lot of hatred against Monica in his mind. The very next day, that is, on the 3rd of October in the afternoon, Rajkumar reaches Sapna Raj Valley again. He enters the society through the main gate, and by chance, no one sees him entering. Then he goes straight to Monica's apartment below, but he notices that Monica's car is not parked there. Seeing this, he understands that Monica is not at home at the moment. However, instead of leaving from there, Rajkumar decides to wait for Monica to arrive in the society. Now, because Rajkumar knows every route in the society, he decides to hide on the terrace of the society because, generally, no one comes to the terrace. Meanwhile, Rajkumar keeps looking down repeatedly and checks Monica's car, but even after the whole October 3rd passes, Monica's car is not seen. Then the next day, October 4th comes, but Monica's car still doesn't show up, and then October 4th also passes. On October 5th, Monica's car was checked several times by Rajkumar since morning, but it wasn't seen. Now, it had been almost 2 days since he stayed on the terrace. There was neither food to eat nor anything to drink on the terrace during this time. Many times, Rajkumar felt like leaving from there, but the fire of revenge didn't let him go, And fueled by this vengeance, Rajkumar spent more than 48 hours hungry and thirsty on the terrace. Around 3 to 3:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2016, Rajkumar came down once again, and this time he saw Monica's car parked. This meant that Monica had returned home. Seeing this, there was a strange smile on Rajkumar's face, but then he went back to the terrace and started waiting for darkness. After that, he comes downstairs around 6:30 in the evening and rings Monica's flat doorbell. When Monica asks who, Rajkumar identifies himself as a security supervisor. Hearing this, Monica opens the door, but as soon as she does, Rajkumar forcefully pushes her and then shuts the door from inside. Before Monica can comprehend anything, Rajkumar takes out a knife from his pocket and warns her, "If you make noise, I'll stab you." Still, Monica screams loudly to protect herself, but Rajkumar covers her mouth with his hand. Then Rajkumar takes Monica to the bathroom, intimidating and controlling her. After that, he forcefully takes Monica to the bedroom at knife point, lays her on the bed, ties both her hands behind the bed first, then ties both her legs as well. Now, Rajkumar demands money from Monica at knife point. Upon seeing herself trapped, Monica also gets very nervous, so she tells the Rajkumar, "Take all the money in the purse." After that, the Rajkumar empties Monica's entire purse. About 4,000 Indian rupees come out of the purse, like $48. But the Rajkumar's desire is not satisfied with that, and he asks Monica for more money. So Monica says, "I only have this much money right now. If you need more money, I have a debit card. Take it and withdraw money from the ATM." The Rajkumar didn't know how to use a debit card. Still, he learns from Monica how to use it. So, systematically, Monica tells him the way to withdraw money, how to insert the card into the ATM machine, then select the language, and then how to enter the secret PIN. And along with that, she also tells him her debit card's PIN number. I think, maybe in that situation, Monica feels that now Rajkumar will leave her and go from here. Then she will complain to the police and Rajkumar will be caught through the location of the debit card. But Rajkumar takes the money and card and puts a cloth in Monica's mouth. After doing all this, he now knew that Monica could not do anything, so he leaves from there with great confidence and then goes to the kitchen. He takes out water from the fridge, boils the eggs, eats them with great ease, and there was no hurry for him. He was eating and drinking with great comfort because he knew that Monica lived alone in that flat. Now, he also takes out ice cream from the fridge and eats it. Besides, he also eats chocolate, meaning that all the hunger and thirst he had been suffering for 2 days on the terrace is satisfied now. It was around 12 o'clock at night by all this. When his stomach is full again, he returns to Monica. He takes her phone, although it was locked, but Rajkumar's unlock it by forcing Monica. Then Rajkumar opens an adult site on her phone and forcibly shows her 3 adult videos. Feeling all this, Monica becomes even more anxious because she realized that Rajkumar was not going to let her go now. Then Rajkumar unties the rope from Monica's legs and removes all the clothes from her waist down. Then he fulfills his desire that had been in his mind since the first day he saw Monica. It was nearly 2 a.m. in the morning by now, and Rajkumar had been in Monica's apartment for almost 8 hours when Rajkumar's desire was filled. He gets nervous for the first time when the question arises in his mind whether Monica knows him well, and if he leaves Monica alive, she will tell the police about it, and then the Rajkumar will be punished. So the prince lifted a pillow from the same bed and began to suffocate Monica's mouth and kept pressing until she died. Then the Rajkumar got up from there comfortably and went to the bathroom again. After that, Rajkumar shaved his beard, then he bathed, and at 3:30 a.m. on October 6, 2016, in the darkness, he sneaked out of the Sapna Valley stealthily. Then at 6 a.m., after withdrawing money from the ATM, he went to Bangalore, where the police arrested him. After hearing the entire story, all the police officers were quite surprised. After that, the Goa police gathers all the evidence against Rajkumar. Then, on January 6, 2017, a 228-page charge sheet is present in court, charging murder, rape, and robbery. However, the trial of this case is still ongoing. Let's see when the criminal will be punished. If there is any update in this case, we will update you through the channel's community post. So friends, this was the complete story of the Monica Gerd murder case.
Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In 1980, the small town of Ambato in Ecuador, South America, was eagerly looking forward to celebrating the popular festival of fruits and flowers. This festival, which began in the mid-20th century, was created to help the local community cope with the devastating aftermath of a powerful earthquake that struck the region on August 5, 1949. The earthquake claimed the lives of 5,000 people and left the town in ruins. The Festival of Fruits and Flowers became a beacon of hope for the people of Ambato, providing them with a sense of unity and a way to heal from the tragedy. However, before the earthquake, there was an event that raised concerns. At the time, countless little girls between the ages of 8 and 12 were disappearing without a trace. Parents were crying out for answers as they desperately searched for hope. One girl was sent to sell some items in order to purchase a bus ticket home. She was never seen again. It was feared that she may have been sold into sex slavery. She was one of the many little girls that went missing in 1980. And even though the number of missing children was growing, the police wrote them off as runaways and did little to help find the lost children of Ambato. Law enforcement issued a statement suggesting that one of the missing girls may have run away due to poor academic performance. This appears to be a half-hearted effort to evade responsibility and avoid taking action to locate the missing children. Such a response is not only irresponsible, but also disgraceful. Regardless of the cops' incompetence, the families did everything they could to find their daughters, who were clearly in some kind of trouble. Then suddenly, like being sucked into a nightmare, bodies started washing up. The bodies were some of the missing girls. They had been raped and strangled, and some of them had been choked to death so viciously that their eyes had come out of their sockets. But the nightmare wasn't over, and more innocent girls went missing. The families wanted answers, but with no tips, no evidence, no persons of interest, and no leads, the police could offer no explanation to the families of Ambato, who knew damn well that there was a boogeyman in the town preying on their little girls. But this was no longer a sole concern for the town of Ambato. Citizens across Ecuador started to panic because, after all, the monster could be anywhere. Ivanova Yakume was the 9-year-old daughter of a respected baker. She disappeared while fetching some food for her father on February 15, 1980. Her family believed she'd been taken for ransom, and because her father was well known in the community, the cops took his cries for help more seriously. He and his wife hung posters offering around $20,000 for any news about his daughter's whereabouts. It was around this time that a national newspaper began to cover the story of the missing girls. Then, on March 8th, the little girl's body was found in a cabin on a farm. She reportedly died lying naked on an old, dirty mattress. She too had been raped and strangled. The following day, March 9th, 1980, an unfamiliar man spent most of the day in the Ambato Plaza, peddling various small items such as chains and locks. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he made his way to a food stand operated by Carlina Ramon. While the stranger appeared to be assessing the menu, Carlina observed that his focus abruptly shifted to something else, her 11-year-old daughter, Alicia. The man seemed hell-bent on getting the young girl's attention. When her mother wasn't looking, he repeatedly gestured for her to come over to him, but Alicia was cautious. She told her mother what the man was doing. This must have spooked the stranger, who began to hurry out of the plaza. But Carlina Ramon was suspicious. She was aware of the missing girls, and she believed in her gut feeling about the situation. With the help of the other plaza vendors, she went after the stranger, and just after he exited the plaza, Carlina and her group caught him. They overpowered him before dragging him back inside. Carlina wasted no time and immediately accused him of kidnapping and murdering the dead children. But the man pleaded, explaining that he was nothing more than a humble worker with a pure heart. They called the authorities and held him there until the police arrived. When the cops brought the suspicious man in for questioning, they were shocked to learn his true identity. He wasn't even a native of Ecuador. He was from Colombia, and he'd been missing since 1957 when he was just 8 years old. His mother assumed he'd been kidnapped. That man is Pedro Alonso Lopez. He was born into poverty on October 8, 1948, in Ipiales, Nariño, Colombia. When he was 5, he moved with his mother to El Espino. His mother was a prostitute with 13 children. Pedro was her 7th. Pedro's father, Medado Reyes, was part of Colombia's right-wing party and was killed in La Violencia, a 10-year-long civil war in Colombia that lasted from 1948 to 1958. It was a battle between the Colombian Conservative Party and the Colombian Liberal Party. It started with the assassination of a liberal presidential candidate, and well, it left the poor country riddled with crime, chaos, and bloodshed. The war is estimated to have cost Colombia around 200,000 lives. It was a horrible time and place for anyone to be born into, but it was the hand Pedro Lopez was dealt. It's believed that Pedro's dad, Medado, had cheated on his wife with Pedro's mom, Benilda Lopez de Castaneda. Pedro never met his father. His mother, Benilda, was 3 months pregnant with him when his father was killed. Benilda claimed that Pedro was a polite young boy who had aspiring dreams to be a teacher, and was even known to help his brothers and sisters with their besaufrays. In a school for orphans, at 12 years old, a teacher sexually assaulted Pedro. In response, Pedro stole money from the office and ran away. A few years later, at the age of 18 or 21, Pedro was caught and arrested for stealing a car. On day 2 of his imprisonment, he was gang-raped by 4 older prisoners. This was likely his breaking point, the moment when Pedro truly snapped and the monster was fully born. Instead of reporting the assault to the prison authorities, Pedro took matters into his own hands. He crafted a makeshift knife and over a 2-week period, ended the lives of 3 of his 4 attackers. A following investigation labeled the triple murder as self-defense, and reports state that Lopez only had 2 years added to his sentence as punishment for the crimes. After that, no one messed with Pedro again. However, when Pedro was finally released from prison, he began stalking young girls as if it were his full-time career. By 1978, in the country of Peru alone, he had an estimated 100 victims, all little girls, all dead at his hands. At the time, he primarily preyed upon the children of local tribes. Eventually, Pedro was captured. They caught him trying to kidnap a 9-year-old girl. Pedro was stripped, tortured for hours by the tribe, and then buried up to his neck in sand. They poured syrup on him and planned to let the fierce Peruvian ants slowly feast on the evil child murderer's flesh. Luckily, an American missionary was driving by in her Jeep when she saw what was going on and stepped in to help. She pleaded with the tribe to spare Pedro's life and proposed handing him over to the authorities instead, as that was the proper course of action. The tribespeople consented and placed Pedro, still bound, in the back of the missionary's vehicle. Some reports state that the woman did indeed turn Pedro over to the police, but not wanting to waste time investigating native tribal complaints, they simply deported Pedro back to Ecuador. However, in Pedro's own words, this is not what happened. He said she never approached the police and instead let him go free at the border of Colombia, a foolish mistake that would lead to more victims across South America. When talking about the missionary that saved him, Pedro stated that the only reason he didn't kill her in the end was because she was too old for him to be attracted to her. And so, the monster of the Andes continued his reign of terror. Lopez's stalking was consistent while he traveled through Colombia and Ecuador. During this time, a huge quantity of missing young girls were being attributed to slavery and trafficking ring abductions. There were no suspects, no evidence, and no trace of the missing girls until a flash flood hit the town of Ambato, Ecuador, in 1980. Nature had uncovered the remains of 4 little girls who had gone missing. They had been raped, tortured, and strangled. 3 days later, the police arrested Pedro Lopez at the local plaza after a struggle. With his capture, it appeared that the people of Ecuador could once again feel safe in their beds at night. Despite being subjected to physical abuse and intimidation while in police custody, Pedro continued to profess his innocence. The authorities remained convinced of his guilt, even though their heavy-handed interrogation tactics failed to elicit a confession. They planned it, sending undercover cop Captain Gonzalez to be Pedro's cellmate. For 27 days, Gonzalez hardly slept, keeping a towel round his neck at night, scared Lopez would strangle him. But he kept his cool, pretending to be a rapist too, and soon Pedro started confessing. He bragged about his murders in Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia, boasting with glee about his evil antics. As Pedro spilled the beans about everything, Captain Gonzalez said the information he received was beyond his worst nightmare. Then, on the 31st of July in 1981, 33-year-old Pedro Lopez pleaded guilty to the murders of around 57 little girls. The fact is, Pedro Lopez told Captain Cordova everything. But at the start, the police weren't 100% convinced by Pedro's confession. Perhaps the man they had in custody was a madman raving about crimes he didn't even commit. It wouldn't be the first time. After all, he was homeless. Maybe he found prison more comfortable than the streets, and this was his attempt to find free room and board. But those suspicions quickly faded as Pedro Lopez led the police to the graves of over 50 little girls. The townspeople were so thirsty for the child killer's blood that when they brought him with them to show them where the bodies were, he had to be dressed up like a police officer for his own protection. 2 months later, in 1980, he pleaded guilty to 110 murders, over 100 little innocent girls. Law enforcement stated that Pedro could have been charged with 350 murders, but extra trials in Peru and Colombia would have just been too complex and too expensive for Ecuador. And Pedro wasn't even sorry. As a matter of fact, he never showed any remorse at all. Once the truth was out, he was quite happy to talk about what he did and how much joy it gave him. He compared himself to spectators at a bullfight, waiting to see either the bull or the matador face sudden death, which doesn't make any sense to anyone. But still, that's what he said. He also said there's a divine and wonderful moment when he has his hands wrapped around a little girl's neck. He said he could look in her eyes and watch as a certain light or spark would suddenly fizzle out. He stated that the moment of death is exciting, and that someday when he gets out, he will feel that moment again. He explained that he will be happy to kill again. Pedro believes it's his mission to kill, and he relished the attention he got, never missing an opportunity to talk about his crimes on camera. After leading authorities to over 50 bodies, Pedro claimed he was tired and refused to help anymore. The coward confessed to 350 murders in total, and he was convicted and found guilty of the 110 murders that he was charged with. But Ecuador had no death penalty. It had been abolished for social reasons 100 years prior to Pedro's convictions. He would serve his time alive in prison, but the families obviously weren't amused. They offered a reward of around $25,000 for anyone who would end the life of Pedro Lopez behind bars. But Pedro was reportedly held in the center of an abandoned part of the prison, on top of a mountain. He was kept there, incarcerated away from other inmates for his own protection and for theirs. Pedro had spent most of his years in solitary confinement on top of that mountain. And during that time, it's reported that only one person was ever granted an interview with the monster of the Andes, a Canadian reporter named Ron Leitner, who described his meeting with the child murderer. Ron was searched for weapons when he entered the facility. He quietly made his way down the hall towards. He was actually the warden's 26-year-old daughter, and she seemed to ignite Pedro's desires. Lopez told the warden that he hadn't touched a woman in years, and the only way he would do the interview was if he were permitted to touch the hands of the warden's daughter. Everyone who heard what he said gasped in shock. Guards raised their guns to an aim, and the atmosphere was tense as the brave girl extended her hands towards the monster. Pedro very delicately touched the tips of his fingers to her wrists. Anything could have happened, but Pedro released the warden's daughter without harm, later stating that she was too old for him. The gun stayed fixed on Pedro Lopez, as he answered every question Ron Leitner asked him. By the end of his reign of terror, Pedro had developed an insatiable appetite for the torture and murder of little girls. Before he was caught, he had been killing 2 or 3 girls a week, every week, for 3 years. He claimed he was the man of the century and that no one would ever forget him. Lopez explained that he enticed his young victims by offering them presents, such as mirrors or small ornaments. He led them to secluded locations where he had pre-dug their graves, occasionally right beside the recently interred remains of his previous victims. At times, he didn't even bother to bury them. Pedro also admitted to enjoying the act of tracking tourist families, particularly those with attractive blonde daughters. He devoted considerable time to stalking English and Scottish families, but he never acted on his impulses because their parents were too vigilant and protective. He once confessed to investigators that he favored Ecuadorian girls due to their more gentle, trusting, and innocent nature compared to their Colombian counterparts. Pedro would acquire his local victims by lurking around the markets of the towns, looking for girls with a certain look in their faces, a look of innocence and beauty, things he wanted to steal. His victims had to be what he called good girls, usually working with their mothers. He would stalk them for a couple of days, waiting for the poor child to be left alone. Once protective eyes were off the little girl, Lopez would swoop in and give her a trinket as a gift. He would then talk his victims into following him to the edge of town, with the promise of providing her with another gift that she could present to her mother. This was the sick monster's modus operandi for abducting children. He would keep them there with him and hold them like a loving parent until sunrise. Then, at the first sight of light in the sky, he would get excited, rape them, force himself on the child with his hands around her throat, and then strangle her to death as the sun rose. He never killed at night, claiming it was only good if he could see her eyes when she died. Pedro said the kill would have been wasted in the dark, so he never killed anyone at night, as a rule. He had to watch them die in the daylight. Pedro said he spent a lot of time making sure they were dead. The piece of filth called himself considerate because of this. He would use a mirror to check and see if they were still breathing. Then he would cut their throats or wrists to see if the blood was still pumping. If the victim was still alive, he would finish them off. He said sometimes he would have to kill them all over again, and he claimed they never screamed because they didn't expect anything to happen. The girls were too innocent to suspect his evil intentions. Lopez also acted out strange fantasies with the dead bodies of his victims, propping them up in graves and talking to them as if they were alive. He would sometimes pose 3 or 4 little girls up in the same hole. He claimed his friends liked company, saying it was like having a tea party, but because his victims were dead and couldn't move, Pedro would eventually get bored and go find more little girls. When asked why he only chose young girls, he stated, "Why have old chicken when you can have young chicken?" Which again makes no sense. In Ecuador, this monster was only sentenced to 16 years inside due to Ecuadorian law. The public was outraged, but there was nothing anyone could do. Then, to add insult to injury, Pedro Alonso Lopez walked free from Garcia Moreno prison on the 31st of August in 1994. After serving only 14 years behind bars. He reportedly got an early release for good behavior. Rumor was Pedro would be extradited to Colombia, where he would face a firing squad, but sadly, that never happened. He was sent back to Colombia, where they attempted to try him for a 20-year-old murder. Instead of being convicted, Pedro was declared insane in 1995 and institutionalized in a psychiatric facility. And here's the next kick in the face. 3 years later, in February of 1998, Pedro Alonso Lopez, who admitted to killing 350 little girls, was declared sane and released, pending a $50 bill and additional stipulations that he should continue his psychiatric treatment. and report himself to police on a monthly basis. Neither of those stipulations were ever upheld. He later showed up at his elderly mother's house in El Espinal. She had pleaded with authorities to never release her son, but they had, and he was standing in her doorway. She thought Pedro was going to murder her. After all, he had stated on TV that he blamed her for every pain in his heart. Pedro instructed his trembling mother to get down on his knee so he could give her his blessing. Then he simply asked for his life inheritance, which was odd considering she was alive. Maybe he meant something left behind from his father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Blake Leibel was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada on the 8th of May in 1981. His family was a well-off family right up the tree. His father, Lorne Leibel, is a well-known real estate tycoon and Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, while Blake's mother, Eleanor Chettle, inherited Alroz products from her father, Paul Chettle. This company makes plastic poly-tarp materials and is reported to generate over $28 million in sales annually. But while grandfather Paul Chettle was a success, it was reported that he was known to be a control freak and bully. Paul's wife, Blake's grandmother, suffered from a severe mental illness of some kind. The specific diagnosis remains unknown, but what is known is that when Paul Chettle passed away, he left a will behind that withheld inheritance from his family, pending not only alcohol and drug screening but also an HIV test. Once relatives successfully passed these stipulations, Paul Chettle's girlfriend would get 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, a Cadillac, and some other parting gifts, while Blake's mother got a payout of $12 million. Oddly enough, Blake's brother Cody Leibel was cut out of the will, with Paul Chettle stating that it wasn't out of lack of love, but rather that he knew Cody's father would adequately provide for him. On the other side of the family, Blake and Cody's father, Lorne Leibel, was a man who dated beautiful young women and took them out in fancy Ferraris. He was the envy of any man who set eyes on his fortunes or female companions. When Lorne Leibel split up with Eleanor Chettle, Blake lived with his mom, while Cody lived with his dad. It was during this time that Blake and his father reportedly became distant and estranged, as Blake felt that Lorne wasn't providing enough for him financially. Even so, the Leibel family was, by all accounts, a highly successful one. Even Blake's grandfather, Stanley Leibel, was a well-known sailor who competed in the 1968 Summer Olympics and then later developed hundreds of homes across Toronto. Even Blake's aunt, Terry Leibel, is a Canadian journalist who served as a host for CBC's Olympic coverage during the 1996, 2002, 2004, and 2006 Games. Blake and his brother Cody Leibel were destined for success right from the very start, or at least they certainly had the financial environment around them to allow them to succeed at whatever they put their minds to. As a matter of fact, when Cody Leibel moved to California, he certainly left his mark of success on the world. He even sold his 5,500 square foot home in Beverly Crest for almost $18 million in 2017. The buyer was reportedly Katy Perry. Then later on the same year, Cody bought Reba McEntire's house for a reported $25 million, crowning him the youngest homeowner in Beverly Park history. This move made him neighbors with big names like Sylvester Stallone, Mark Wahlberg, Denzel Washington, and even Eddie Murphy. As the world's youngest owner of a Ferrari Enzo, Cody not only owned a record label, but he was a regular at a poker club called Molly's Game that reportedly hosted famous faces like Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Tobey Maguire. Cody Leibel certainly seemed as successful as the family that raised him. Cody's brother, Blake Leibel, moved to California in 2004. He reportedly still received an allowance from his mother that totaled close to $2 million in just 8 years. In 2011, Blake's mother Eleanor would die of brain cancer, leaving a huge inheritance behind to Blake and Cody. Roughly 2 years later, Blake challenged his mother's will to remove his father as trustee and deny his brother Cody his inheritance. But Blake, who reportedly didn't even attend his mother's funeral, received little sympathy from the courts. But who is Blake Leibel? He wrote and directed a comedy film in 2009 called Bold. It was very low budget, and it didn't hit well at all. The movie was a massive flop with a 2.6-star rating on IMDb, but apparently you can still find it on Plex TV if you're curious. Blake Leibel also directed a 2013 film called Soulmates. He's even listed as a creative consultant and director on a few episodes of Mel Brooks' Spaceballs, the animate. In 2010, Blake published a graphic novel called Syndrome. The novel was about a man named Dr. Chattel, who happens to share the same name as Blake's own mother. In the novel, Dr. Tettel studies serial killers. He also goes as far as to recruit a town full of actors and then set up a fake Truman Show-style scenario. Next, he fakes the execution of a serial killer before wiping his mind and allowing the memoryless man to run free in the fake town, so Chattel can monitor his actions. The Doctor's goal in the book is to cure serial killers. Chattel's character can be quoted saying that evil is not some mysterious force. Evil is a syndrome. Co-author of the book, Ryan Roberts, stated that Blake told him that he had done a lot of research on serial killers. Ryan also recalled how Leibel jerked his hands upward when showing how a victim could be flipped upside down in order to drain them of fluid. In hindsight, Ryan Roberts said he'll never forget that. While Blake didn't actually write or illustrate the final edition of Syndrome, he was credited as creator of the book, and he wrote an introduction at the start of the novel, asking the question, "If you loved hurting things, what would you do?" Syndrome, Blake's biggest success, and it ended up with him giving away stacks of the graphic novels for free at Comic-Con in San Diego. A producer said Blake wanted to be a respected comic book artist, and he used his cash to try and buy that image. He tried hard to come across as cool and edgy, but it was clear to everyone that Blake Leibel had some serious mental issues that he needed to address. His mental state had begun to deteriorate, and he was spiraling into a dark abyss. Those close to him had started to recognize the signs, but none could foresee the depths to which Blake would ultimately sink until it was beyond anyone's reach to save him. Blake Leibel had quite the romantic life. In 2006, Blake met a Californian model named Amanda Braun. Amanda was previously in a relationship with Andrew Olczyk, who died in prison following convictions for crimes committed as a crooked hedge fund manager. After 5 years of dating, Blake and Amanda finally tied the knot in 2011. Not long after the wedding, Amanda Braun Leibel gave birth to a son. While the couple appeared to live comfortably in their Beverly Hills mansion, Blake continued to cash in and spend his checks pretty much as quickly as he received them. He reportedly smoked weed constantly and came up with various plans for success, but none of his ideas proved fruitful. During this time, one of Leibel's friends said Blake was developing a dark obsession with brutal violence. It was like Blake was becoming a different person. He was distant and paranoid. Then in the summer of 2015, Blake left Amanda while she was pregnant with their second child. This was reportedly due to his pot-smoking habit consuming his life, but I'd say there was more than a marijuana issue brewing. Blake began isolating from almost everyone as he sank deeper into a world filled with gore, violence, and darkness. He even stopped returning his family's calls and began to suspect that his brother Cody was in deep debt to some Russian gang members, and he was worried it could potentially bring harm back his way. But there was never any evidence that Cody Leibel owed any major debt like that. And no one could understand why Blake's sanity was spiraling out of control. But most of his friends claimed it was initially the death of his mother that brought on this dark madness. Eleanor Chattel's $5.5 million home in Toronto, plus the millions of other dollars acquired due to her death, just wasn't enough for Blake. He was broke, and when he failed to have his mother's will overturned in 2013, he turned to his father to help him pay for his mounting credit card debts. Then Blake was sued by his lawyers for non-payment in the unsuccessful case of Eleanor Chattel's will. After Blake split up with Amanda, he began pitching another original script called Psychopomp. It was about a caped vigilante that cuts off the heads of villains and then uploads his antics to YouTube. But reviewers of the script stated that it was terrible in every way possible. There wasn't one thing about Blake Libel's new project that anyone liked. It was likened to a bad rip-off version of Batman, where Batman is violent, psychotic, stupid, sadistic, and highly unlikable. Psychopomp was nothing more than a gratuitously violent film devoid of any imaginative flair. However, there were whispers that Hilary Shaw, a producer involved in Children of Men, had expressed interest in the Psychopomp screenplay, yet this supposed development never materialized. While married to a pregnant Amanda Braun, Blake had started seeing Iana Kassian, a stunning 30-year-old Ukrainian former attorney from Kiev. In no time, Blake got her pregnant too, and for a while, they seemed happy and healthy as Blake pulled Iana into his fantasy world of Hollywood hot pink. All the while, his mental decline was picking up speed at a volatile pace. In May of 2016, Iana gave birth to a baby girl named Diana, and to outside observers, the new family appeared to be doing well. However, the reality was far from idyllic. Blake harbored intense jealousy towards the infant, as a storm of anger raged within him. No longer the sole object of Iana's affection, Blake found himself replaced by baby Diana, pushing him to new heights of psychological instability. He incessantly demanded sexual attention from Iana, threatening to abandon her for another woman if she refused his advances. In an attempt to salvage their relationship, Iana sent her newborn daughter to live with her mother in a nearby apartment, which Blake financially supported. Then on the 20th of May, Blake Libel was arrested for sexual assault not far from his condo. The alleged victim was Blake's third girlfriend, Constance Bucaferi. She'd been living in another house he owned that was also a couple of miles away from his West Hollywood apartment, where he lived with Iana. Constance claimed Blake forced himself on her in the house. Bucaferi is known for being a storyboard artist on Aquaman, and working in the art department for films like Snow White and the Huntsman, P.S. I Love You, and The Emoji Movie. Blake Libel was released from custody around 15 hours after he was arrested, following a bail payment of $100,000. Iana had bailed Blake out of jail, but finding out about the affair with Constance was the final straw for her. She moved into her mother, Olga Kassian's ma. There was only one door left to check, and it was locked. The cops tried to force the door open to the bedroom, but a mattress was barricading the door from the other side. The cops shouted for whoever was in there to come out. And that's when Blake's voice finally responded, saying he wasn't going to come out because he was scared that the officers were going to beat him up. They assured him that this wouldn't happen and that they were just there to check on his girlfriend to make sure she was okay. Blake replied back that she was fine. He said she was at the hospital and gave them a room number. He also said that his father would be there soon and that he wasn't coming out until then. Blake was referring to his accountant and mentor, Stephen Green. Blake had called Stephen around noon and asked him to come to the apartment. For a month before Stephen Green received that call, he had been unable to get in contact with Blake Libel. Green had called, messaged, left voicemails, and even emailed Blake several times, but he never got a reply. Stephen Green even left a voicemail on Blake's phone, stating that he was worried about him and that he loved him. He said, whatever was going on, he wanted to help him get through it. But as you're about to find out, it was way too late for that. When Green arrived at the condo, he spoke to Blake through the partially opened bedroom door in the apartment. A short while later, a detective arrived on the scene to find Green now in the living room talking to Blake on the phone. Libel was still barricaded in the master bedroom. When Green hung up the phone, the detective asked him to call Blake back, which he did. After a few minutes of conversation, Blake Libel finally agreed to come out. He was only wearing boxer shorts when he emerged from the room. Stephen Green gave Blake some clothing to put on. Luckily, officers checked the clothing first and found Libel's passport and about $4,000 in cash. It's thought that he was going to try and make a break for it, but that never happened. As the officers entered the bedroom, one of them screamed, "She's on the bed!" The detective immediately ordered everyone to go outside, and he called in the paramedics who were waiting on standby. Sadly, Brianna Cassian was pronounced dead at 1:02 p.m. on May 26th. Brianna Cassian's naked body was lying on a clean sheet and was covered by a red Mickey Mouse blanket on top of a blue polka dot blanket. Her head was on a pillow. There were abrasions and bruising on the left side of Cassian's face, consistent with blunt force trauma. There were human bite marks on Cassian's left jaw and left bicep, as well as fingernail marks under her jawline. Her scalp had been removed from around her eyebrows to the hairline on the back of her head. A large portion of skin on the right side of her face had also been removed. The skull bone was visible. There were cuts across her lower forehead, below the eyebrows. There was also a cut on the right side of her face, from her cheek to her jawline, and another on the left side of her face, toward where the ear should have been, but it was missing. The medical examiner later proposed that a sharp-bladed tool had been used to cut off the skin, but he also noted that some facial tissue had been ripped away by hand. Considering the extensive damage to Brianna's face and skull, combined with the challenging nature of both cutting and tearing the tissue, the doctor believed that inflicting these injuries would have been a lengthy process. Moreover, the presence of inflammation in the tissue and bleeding from several severed samples led to the tragic conclusion that Brianna Cassian was still alive while enduring this prolonged torture. The examiner also determined that there was no blood in Brianna's heart, veins, or arteries. Half of Brianna's blood supply was missing. This is highly unusual, even considering the weight of her injuries. Gravity wouldn't have been enough to drain that much blood from her body. Her heart would have had to have been pumping the entire time. It was the medical examiner's opinion that Blake may have drained Brianna's blood by placing her in the bathtub with her head lower than her feet, and then running water over her head, which could have increased the blood flow and potentially interfere with clotting. Due to the presence of foam in her nostrils, the doctor concluded that Brianna was probably submerged in water for at least 30 minutes. Her body was then washed and placed on the clean sheet. Her cause of death was ruled as exsanguination, which is the draining of blood. There was an additional pillow to the left of Brianna with an indentation on it. It was as if someone had been laying next to her. There were dried blood stains on the mattress beneath the sheet she lay upon. The investigation uncovered the extent of the violence that had occurred throughout Blake Libel's condo. According to court documents, blood stains and pieces of human flesh were discovered behind the bed. Blood was also splattered on the wall near Brianna's body. A fragment of an eyebrow was found on the floor beside the bed. In addition to the mattress Brianna was lying on, bloodstains were present on another mattress from a second bed in the room, as well as on a side table and in various other areas of the bedroom. The mattress that had been used to obstruct the door belonged to this second bed. A clump of hair and a blood-stained razor were found in the trash can. When cops entered the bathroom of the master bedroom, warm water was running in the bathtub. Bloodstains and hair could be seen in the tub. A green paring knife with blood on it was found in the top drawer in the bathroom. The oval shape of the bloodstains found on the headboard of the bed and the guest bedroom were consistent with having been made via the top of Brianna's scalped head. There was blood on 2 towels, a pillowcase, the floor, and the base of the drapes in the guest bedroom. The drain in the tub of the guest bathroom also tested positive for blood. The same drain contained some freshly cut hair. Chemical testing also confirmed the presence of blood that someone had tried to clean up in areas of the dining room, the hallway, the guest bathroom, and both of the bedrooms. The kitchen garbage disposal also tested positive for blood. Then more evidence was found in the dumpster. Inside trash bags that had been thrown down the garbage chute, mere feet from Blake's condo door, investigators found blood-stained bedding, towels, clothing, bath mats, placemats, a bed skirt with bloody handprints, human tissue, including some pieces with hair that appeared to be scalp, and the missing ear. Samples taken from Blake's hand and fingernails also contained Brianna's DNA. Jana's hands showed signs of injury consistent with self-defense. The marks and bruises seen on Blake's face when arrested were most likely inflicted by Jana, fighting for her life. The LA coroner concluded that she was kept alive for around 8 hours. He said he'd never seen injuries like that, and he likened them to wartime injuries. Blake Leibel was arrested and charged with the torture and murder of Jana Kassian. It was later discovered that he used her phone to order food to the apartment via Postmates twice during the time Jana was missing. Blake's demeanor on the scene was described as ice cold. He acted as if he didn't even know Jana was dead. When an officer told him, he simply replied, "Well, I guess you'll find out who did it then." Leibel donned an evil grin as officers led him away from the condo in handcuffs. On June 26, 2018, Blake Leibel was sentenced to life without parole. Due to the nature of his crimes, he was eligible for the death penalty, but the DA didn't pursue it, even though doctors deemed Blake not to be insane and stated he was fit to stand trial. It took the jury just 3 hours to deliver a guilty verdict. Blake was also ordered to pay about $43 million to Jana Kassian's family. Cody Leibel was present on every day of the trial. Blake's father never showed up. Jana Kassian had only been living in the United States for a couple of years before tragedy struck. She was working on becoming a translator. What happened to her was absolutely devastating. It was a crime with little motive outside of Blake's narcissistic desire to control women with his allowance. It was as if this aged, evil little boy had never been rejected, and once he was, or rather felt like he couldn't take it. His ego collapsed, and he snatched away the life of his newborn daughter's beautiful mother in the cruelest way possible. Blake Leibel will rot in prison where he belongs, alone with no one, nothing, and no future that will lead to any shedding of light in his direction.